wonderful day, not even for me, for all the team.
Bravissimo.
Some victories are planned, others are stolen, and a few feel like they shouldn't even be possible. In 2012, Pastor Maldonado arrived in Barcelona as a long shot, not a rising star, not a title favorite, a driver most people barely penciled into the points. By Sunday night, he had delivered one of the most improbable wins of modern Formula One, an underdog shock that left the paddock speechless, a garage in flames, and a story people still whisper about a decade later. It wasn't luck, it wasn't chaos. It was nerve, precision, and a weekend where a forgotten team remembered who they once were. But that wasn't the whole story. Williams before the storm. Proud name, quiet expectations. Williams didn't arrive in Spain as a powerhouse. They arrived as a memory, a team with a museum full of trophies, still searching for a pulse in the present. The FW34 wasn't supposed to frighten anyone. It was tidy, efficient, conservative, the kind of car that survives Sundays, not shapes them. Sponsors were polite. Pundits were polite. Polite is another word for invisible. And then there was Pastor. Quick hands, thick skin. A driver people labeled before they listened. Too wild, some said, too unpredictable. Not cut from the cloth of the champions next door. He heard all of it. He heard the jokes, the digs, the little shrugs when his name flashed on timing screens. Barcelona brought its usual promises, long corners, tire trouble, and a reality check for anyone pretending to be fast. Williams knew exactly where they belonged. On paper. On track, something else was starting to hum. There's a moment in every upset when the favorite glances over their shoulder and realizes they're not alone. Williams felt it on Friday. Sector times that didn't make sense. A balance that finally breathed. Straight line speed that was suddenly respectable. The engineers stared at the data and then at each other. Don't say it. Don't jinx it. Just keep working. But that wasn't the whole story. Saturday. The pole that chose its owner. Qualifying is ruthless. It strips away excuses. In quarter 3, the circuit sharpened, the air cooled, and the lap times dropped into the kind of silence you only notice when the grandstands stop breathing. Hamilton lit it up. Of course he did. It looked settled. Everyone nodded. Order restored. And then the clock refused to end the way everyone expected. McLaren's fuel miscue dragged a red pen across the result. A technical breach, a back-of-the-grid penalty, a gap where a giant used to be. When the dust cleared, one name sat on top, Pastor Maldonado, a first pole that felt like an error message, but it wasn't a gift. It was a door. Yes, Lewis fell, but Pastor had to be there to catch the moment. He had to deliver the lap that put him in range. That's the underdog's job, be close enough to turn someone else's bad luck into your shot at history. He walked away from the paddock that night, not as a sensation, but as a problem, because pole isn't a headline, it's a responsibility. Now he had to start on the clean side of the grid with a sea of Spanish flags waiting for their hero in red to gobble him up into turn 1. Pressure stalked him down the paddock. The quiet Williams boy wore it like a second suit. He didn't look rattled. He looked ready. But that wasn't the whole story. The launch, Ferraris, fireworks, and resolve. When the lights blink out, time bends. Alonso's start wasn't good. It was violent. The Ferrari leapt like it owed Spain a promise and was paying it back with interest. Pastor's reaction was clean, composed, almost studied. He didn't swerve, didn't panic, didn't shriek into turn 1 like a tourist sprinting across traffic. He tucked in, lined up the Ferrari's rear wing, and made a decision. I'm not here to survive. I'm here to win. The opening laps weren't a duel. They were a diagnosis. How much tire was the Ferrari burning to keep the lead? How much was Williams saving without showing it? In Barcelona, the circuit isn't a riddle. It's an interrogation light. High-speed corners strip you bare. If you're lying about your balance, the tires rat you out in 10 laps. From the pit wall, Williams watched wear rates and felt something unfamiliar. Confidence. The FW34 was humming through turns 3 and 9 with a kind of mechanical patience they hadn't tasted for years. Still, Alonso was Alonso. He stretched, Pastor stretched with him. The gap flickered in tenths, a chess clock disguised as a GPS trace. The first pit window crept into view. Tire deg knocked on the door, and with it, the one tool the underdog must always carry, timing. But that wasn't the whole story. The undercut. Arithmetic with consequences. Strategy looks clinical on paper. On track, it's theater. He obeyed in silence. Brake, box, bolt. The stop was crisp. The outlap was a razor. Alonso stayed out. 2 laps that felt like an hour. Behind traffic, fighting dirty air, searching for grip that wasn't there. When Ferrari finally called him in, the arithmetic slammed shut. Pastor flew by on the pit straight with a kind of surgical inevitability. There was no roar, just a gasp. Williams had taken the lead on merit, not miracle. An undercut only works if the pace is real. On Sunday, the pace was frighteningly real. Back on top, Maldonado didn't celebrate. He settled. He ironed his inputs. He made the car small where it needed to be small and stable where it needed to be stable. The next stint wasn't a parade, it was a proof. Could he sit there, in clean air, feeding a gap with laps that didn't fray at the edges? He could. He did. The delta ticked upward. Seconds, not tenths. Williams didn't whisper protect tires, they whispered believe, but that wasn't the whole story. The wobble, a wheel nut, a heartbeat, a hunt. Races rarely gift you a straight path. The final stop blinked on the strategy screens and fate tugged at the thread. A hesitation, a wheel that didn't want to leave, a fraction of a second that felt like a minute. Maldonado rolled out, but the cushion had been carved. Alonso suddenly saw daylight, not distance. The Spanish flags regained their rhythm. The Ferrari grew larger in the mirrors, like a storm building behind a mountain. And as if the gods of drama hadn't had their fill, a Lotus sat where it shouldn't, in Pastor's way. Raikkonen, out of sequence, refusing to disappear on cue. This is the point where many fairy tales stop being fair. Get stuck a lap too long and the heat behind you becomes a flame. Maldonado didn't fidget. He stalked. He studied the exit. He measured Kimi's habits like a safecracker listens to tumblers. Then he opened DRS and made a move so clean you could shave in its reflection. Past the Lotus, back into clear air, back into control. The race tightened into a single idea. Don't blink. Alonso threw everything into the final laps, threats, feints, a nation's insistence. Pastor offered nothing back but precision. Turn-in points that didn't move. Throttle picks that didn't flinch. The Williams drove like it remembered what winning felt like. The Ferrari fought like it refused to forget. The flag waited. The gap survived. The story bent toward the impossible. But that wasn't the whole story. The flag, a silence louder than cheers. The most beautiful thing about an upset is the quiet between the scream and the scoreboard. That hush when 1,000 assumptions die at once. Pastor Maldonado crossed the line and that silence exploded. First Venezuelan to win a Grand Prix. Williams back on the top step for the first time in 8 long years. A paddock that didn't know whether to clap or check the timing loop again. The radio poured out a simple truth. They did it. No trick, no weather lottery, no red flag rewrite of destiny, just a driver who refused to crumble, an engineering team who found grip where there hadn't been any, and a set of decisions that all pointed in the same miraculous direction. Maldonado unbuckled with the face of a man who had borrowed time and paid it back with interest. On the podium, the ritual felt new again. Alonso stood on home soil and looked at the man who'd beaten him fair and straight. Raikkonen was Raikkonen, impervious and yet respectful. Together, they lifted Pastor like a flag, not a courtesy, an acknowledgement. Winners know when someone else has joined their circle. Williams officials tried to be composed. Tried. The camera found eyes with water in them. The smile of a founder who could finally breathe again. But that wasn't the whole story. The fire, joy, smoke, and perspective. In the middle of a celebration, reality demands its tax. A fire in the Williams garage. Black smoke rolling over blue overalls. Choking panic where there should have been dancing. People move faster with fear than with champagne. Mechanics who were heroes an hour ago became the kind of heroes that don't make highlight reels. Hauling equipment, dragging hoses, yanking friends out of danger. The photo of Maldonado carrying a family member out of the thick smoke says more than any press release. Triumph and fragility side by side. It didn't erase the win, it reframed it. Sore throats, singed eyebrows, shaken hands, reminders that heroes go back to being humans as soon as the camera looks away. When the smoke cleared and the reports rolled in, relief replaced adrenaline. Injuries, yes. Tragedy, no. The garage was charred. The memory was not. The weight of a single Sunday, what it meant to Williams. Williams isn't just a team. It's a sentence in the sport's biography. That Sunday added a comma where many had already put a period. Staff who had only seen photos of their team's glory finally felt it in their bones. A win is more than points. It's proof that your hours mean something, that your trade matters, that the logo on your shirt is still a passport, not a souvenir. Engineers don't cry over math, they cry over meaning. The kind of meaning that tells you to keep showing up even when the stopwatch refuses to love you back. The FW34 went to bed that night not as a miracle machine, but as a reminder, if you stack enough corrects, the world has to stop pretending not to notice. The weight of a single Sunday, what it meant to Pastor. When you're labeled, your whole career becomes a court case. Every mistake is evidence. Every near miss is a punchline. Maldonado's win didn't erase his file. It did something braver. It complicated it. It forced anyone paying attention to accept that speed had always been there, that discipline could keep it company, that on the right day, with the right tools, Pastor Maldonado could beat anyone alive. He didn't wave a manifesto. He didn't scold his doubters. He smiled like a man who'd just been allowed to tell his side of the story and had finally been believed. There's a reason that photo of him with the trophy looks like relief wearing joy as a disguise. Some trophies are heavy, this one was weightless. Why it didn't become a dynasty, the physics of magic. Fairy tales don't repeat to order. The rest of 2012 didn't turn into a Williams tour. The paddock gestured at Maldonado's reputation again. See? One-off. Fluke. But that misses what this win actually was. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a proof of concept. Proof that on a level track, with a clear plan, and a driver who refused to fold, even the hierarchy of modern Formula One can be bent, if not broken, for a day. Tires changed. Development curves shifted. The sport moved on at its usual ruthless speed. That's normal. The value of Spain wasn't that it unlocked a flood. It was that it proved the lock could open it all. Years later, people still call it a miracle. That's a nice word. It makes your skin fizz. But miracles leave fingerprints. Look closely and you'll see them everywhere. Setup sheets with circled numbers, tire wear plots that finally refused to spike, a pit stop choreography that held its nerve when the nut stuck, a pass on a Lotus that had to be perfect and was. These are human prints. They don't fit fairy tales. They fit craft. And yes, call it what it felt like. A shock, an ambush of joy, a Sunday that doesn't play by the rules. But when you tell it, don't say the world turned upside down. Say this. For one weekend, the world turned honest. A driver who'd been dismissed proved why nobody with a steering wheel and a heartbeat should be counted out. A team that was supposed to fade reminded everyone that names on buildings get written for a reason. The legacy isn't a chapter in a yearbook. It's a lesson that shows up anytime a midfield car goes purple in Sector 2 and the timing screens stutter. Spain 2012 is the reason an engineer smiles when a simulation throws up something absurd. It's the reason a driver keeps his jaw set when he lines up next to a legend and thinks, quietly, why not me? There's also a scar. The blackened photos from a garage that caught fire on the happiest day of its decade. That image sits next to the podium shot in the story's album. Triumph and fragility, bound together so tightly you can't tell which one teaches you more. Maybe that's the real legacy. Greatness and gratitude on the same page. If you want to understand why people love this sport even when it breaks their heart, replay Spain 2012. Watch a team no one feared outthink a giant. Watch a driver many doubted refuse to doubt himself. Watch the checkered flag wave for a name your predictions forgot to include. That's the promise tucked inside every formation lap. Today might be the day the world learns a new truth. So here's the question that still echoes down the pit lane. Was Maldonado's win a miracle, or was it the moment honesty finally caught up with effort? Maybe it's both. Maybe miracles are just effort that refuses to go unnoticed. Drop your take. What was the exact moment you realized this wasn't a fluke? That the underdog was actually going to finish the job? The undercut? A ball? The pass on Kimi? The last 2 laps when the gap refused to shrink? And tell me this, if you were on that pit wall, would you have called the same strategy? Or would you have blinked first? Either way, remember this the next time a midfield car starts setting purple sectors. The sport owes certainty nothing. On the right Sunday, with the right heart, the underdog doesn't just bark, he bites. And sometimes, just sometimes, he takes the whole trophy home.